Close your eyes and listen to the distant toll of a bronze bell. Beneath your feet, the ground is no longer the floor of your room, but the cold, salt-stained stones of a Venetian wharf in the year 1271. Tonight, the modern world is fading as we embark on a journey that changed the maps of the human mind forever. Before we step onto the galley that waits in the mist, let your body find its final resting place for the night. Adjust your pillows until your neck feels perfectly supported. Feel the weight of your blankets like a protective layer of heavy silk, grounding you to this moment of absolute stillness. If you can hear the hum of a fan or the gentle breath of the wind outside, let those sounds become the white noise of the Adriatic Sea. You are safe, you are anonymous, and for the next 2 hours, time does not exist. We are here to witness the impossible odyssey of Marco Polo, a story that is not merely a record of travel, but a bridge between two souls, two empires, and two mysteries. This is a journey through glittering cities and strange customs that fascinated and confused Europe for generations. As you settle in, take a slow, deep breath. Feel the coolness of the air as it enters, and as you exhale, release the tension held in your jaw, your hands, and your thoughts. The year is 1254, and the city of Venice is breathing with the rhythm of the tides. In a world of silver coins and silk bolts, a boy is born into a silence left by a father he has never known. Marco Polo is already deep in the east, lost somewhere along the caravan trails of Central Asia. Marco's childhood will be shaped by maps, merchant ledgers, and the tales of returning sailors, whispers of golden lands that he will one day see with his own eyes. Let us begin where the salt air meets the stone, following a boy who is about to become a bridge across the spine of the earth. Venice was a city built not just on water, but on wealth, ambition, and the quiet, persistent whispers of distant lands. Its merchants sailed farther, bargained harder, and dreamed bigger than almost any other soul across the landscape of medieval Europe. Imagine the city as it was then, a labyrinth of stone and canal, where the air was always thick with the scent of salt, aged wood, and the cold mist rising from the lagoon. Into this world of salt air, silver coins, and silk bolts, Marco Polo was born in the year 1254. His early years were defined by a profound silence where a father's voice should have been, for Marco Polo was already a ghost in his son's life. A merchant by trade and an adventurer at heart, Niccolo was already deep in the east, tracing the long dusty caravan trails of Central Asia. Marco wouldn't see him, not even once, for the first 15 years of his life. His childhood was shaped not by a father's presence, but by his long absence and the stories that filled that void. Marco grew up under the care of his mother and extended family, but his true companions were the maps, merchant ledgers, and the dull clink of coins that littered the counting houses. He spent hours tracing lines on parchment, imagining the places where the ink ended and the unknown began. He heard tales of Constantinople's golden domes, the biting winds of the Caucasus, and the endless, shimmering lands beyond Persia. These were not mere bedtime stories. They were rumors carried by returning sailors and spice traders, whispers of silken stone that were half believed and half dreamed in the quiet Venetian afternoon. By the time his father and uncle, Maffeo, finally returned to Venice in 1269, Marco had grown into a curious, bright-eyed teenager. Their return was not merely a family reunion. They brought a message from the most powerful man in the East. Kublai Khan, the ruler of the Mongol Empire. The Khan had made a bold request, that the Polos returned to his court with a representative from the Latin Church and a young man of promise. Marco, now about 17, was chosen. He was not a warrior, nor a noble, nor a trained diplomat, but he was clever, observant, and utterly captivated by the idea of going where few Westerners had gone before. In 1271, the journey began in earnest as Marco, Niccolo, and Maffeo left Venice together. Their path was a sprawling web of trade routes known as the Silk Road, a thousand-threaded artery connecting Europe with the mysteries of Asia. From the Mediterranean coast, they traveled by sea to Acre, then crossed through Armenia and Persia, moving through scorched deserts and high plateaus where the air turned thin, cold and sharp as a blade. They slept under starlit skies so vast they felt heavy, waking to winds that carried strange scents of spices, camel sweat, and distant, lonely fire. Marco proved more than capable of keeping pace, absorbing languages quickly and learning customs respectfully. He scribbled down observations in his mind about architecture, dress, coins, and even local superstitions. Where others saw only the hardship of the road, he saw a living map unfolding. They pushed through the remote kingdom of Bedtime, where Marco fell ill and rested for months, before continuing along the treacherous Pamir Mountains, where snow still clung to the jagged dark rocks even in the height of summer. Finally, they crossed the vast Gobi Desert, a brutal stretch of dust and hallucination where sandstorms could bury a man alive, and water was more precious than gold. As they traversed these ancient paths, Marco noted the silence of ghost cities, ravaged by war or plague, contrasted with the hospitality of local rulers in Hidden Valley. He watched how the light changed over the Persian plateaus and how the stars seemed to align differently. Every sunrise brought a new dialect, a new way of dressing, and a new understanding of how vast the world truly was. He was no longer just a boy from Venice. He was becoming a witness to the breadth of human existence. Imagine now the rhythmic swaying of that camel caravan as it moves across the scorched, silent deserts. Feel the slow, steady pulse of the journey. The soft crunch of sand beneath heavy hooves, the low groan of the wooden saddles, and the endless horizon shifting from gold to deep indigo as the sun set. There is no hurry here. There is only the path forward, a slow drift into the heart of the unknown. You are safe, nestled within the rhythm of the caravan, protected by the vastness of the landscape. The heat of the day has faded, replaced by the cool, comforting embrace of the desert night. Beyond these final mountains, the heavy gilded gates of a great empire await, ready to open into a world of marble gold and light that will change your perception of reality forever. Read Soon, the Khan's court and the prison legacy. Target 9, 500 character style. Grandiose, ethereal, narrative pacing around the year 1275. After 3.5 years of enduring dust distance and the relentless elements, the Polos finally stood at the towering gates of the largest empire the world had ever seen. For young Marco, stepping into the inner circle of the Mongol court was like stepping into another world, entirely a realm more magnificent than any place he had witnessed in the narrow, winding streets of Venice. The Mongol Empire, at its height, stretched from the vast Pacific Ocean all the way to the borders of Eastern Europe, held together by sheer force, brilliant strategy, and a deep, insatiable curiosity about the wider world. Kublai Khan, the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, ruled this dominion not just as a warrior emperor, but as a visionary builder of cities, a patron of the sciences, and a man fascinated by the weight of foreign knowledge. His grand palace in Kambalik, the city we know today as Beijing, was no mere collection of tents. It was a sprawling masterpiece of marble, gold, and manicured garden. The Khan took an immediate and personal liking to Marco Polo. In the young Venetian, the ruler found an observant and eager mind, a traveler who spoke with grace and possessed a rare ability to see the intricate details that others often missed. Within a short time, Marco was elevated to a role that few outsiders ever achieved. He became a trusted emissary and a useful mind for the Mongol court. His tasks were immense and varied. Kublai sent Marco to the most distant provinces to report on the state of infrastructure, the health of crops, the nuances of local politics, and even the faint whispers of unrest. These journeys brought Marco into lands that no European had likely ever recorded before. From the steaming, dense jungles of Burma to the silent, frozen highlands of Tibet, he witnessed wonders the West had never even imagined in its wildest dreams. He saw paper money backed by imperial decree, coal that was used for heating, and vast cities lit by thousands of lanterns. He marveled at the Yam system, an organized network of courier stations and swift horses that kept the entire empire connected at a terrifying speed. Everywhere he went, he became the empire's eyes, journeying through lands of snow leopards, witnessing salt being harvested from lakes that turned pink in the sun, and crossing rivers the color of jade. Marco remembered how the Khan's subjects bowed with reverence, how justice was carried out with cold precision, and how truly diverse this empire was. Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and Confucians all lived under the rule of one man, often in a state of surprising harmony. For 17 years, Marco served the Khan, not as a soldier or a spy, but as a vital bridge between cultures. He learned to respect local customs, earning him access to sacred places that even other Mongols avoided. He watched as the Khan received foreign ambassadors bearing tribute pearls from India, ivory from Africa, and even lions from the plains of Persia. The Mongol court was the beating heart of a global network where merchants, mystics, and spies all gathered under the same roof. But as the years passed, one thought returned more often to his mind: Venice, his home, his people, and the name he carried. He had arrived at the court as a wide-eyed boy. Now he was a man in his 30s, shaped by the East, but carrying a quiet longing for the West. The moment to leave finally arrived in the early 1290s. Kublai Khan was growing old, and the empire he had so masterfully ruled was starting to fray at the edges, with intrigue brewing among his heirs behind silk screens. The Polos were permitted to escort a Mongol princess to her marriage in Persia by sea, a voyage that proved to be a brutal test of human endurance. Storms ravaged the fleet, and disease spread in the crowded holds. By the time they reached Persia, hundreds were dead. Still, the Polos survived and reached the Mediterranean world once more after more than 2 decades away. They arrived in Venice not as returning heroes, but as strangers' men with foreign clothes, accented speech, and stories that seemed far too wild to be believed by their own countrymen. Peace, however, did not last long. Venice was soon embroiled in a bitter naval war with Genoa, and Marco was captured in 1298 and thrown into a cold, damp prison. It was there, behind stone walls, that he met Rustichello da Pisa, a writer of romances. With nothing else to do, Marco began to speak, dictating everything he had seen: the Silk Road, the Khan's court, paper money, and the black stones that burned like wood. His book, eventually known as The Travels of Marco Polo, spread like wildfire across Europe, capturing the imagination of kings, merchants, and monks alike. Though many thought his tales were pure fiction, Marco never wavered. On his deathbed in 1324, when friends urged him to admit he had exaggerated his life. He is said to have replied with his final breath, "I did not tell half of what I saw." The legacy of his words planted a seed of curiosity that would eventually inspire explorers like Christopher Columbus to look beyond the known horizon. Marco Polo's real achievement was not the miles he walked, but the horizon he stretched for everyone who stayed behind. The empire's vastness is like a dream that never truly ends, a landscape of gold, jade, and silence that exists just beyond the reach of time. As the echoes of the East begin to fade into the quiet of your room, let your mind release the images of grand palaces, desert caravans, and silken roads. The world of sight and sound is softening now, turning into a gentle gray haze that wraps around you like a soft shroud. You are safe. You are drifting away from the heavy stones of history and the grand arcs of empires. You are moving into the invisible, ethereal world of ancient scents, where the air is thick with the fragrance of 1,000 years, waiting for you to breathe it in and disappear into the night. Long before perfume was a luxury contained in delicate glass bottles, it was a sacred prayer rising through the air's thick, aromatic smoke. In the ancient world, particularly in the golden, sun-drenched valley of the Nile, scent was far more than a pleasant indulgence. It was a profound spiritual language, a bridge connecting the mortal earth to the divine heavens. The very word perfume itself finds its roots in the Latin perfumum, meaning through smoke, a fitting origin for an art form that began with incense rising skyward in elegant, slow-moving spirals during the most sacred of rites. To the ancient Egyptians, fragrance was not simply pleasing to the senses. It was perceived as the invisible, holy breath of the gods themselves. Imagine standing within a temple across the Nile Valley, where the air is heavy, still, and cool. The shadows of the massive stone pillars stretch long across the floor, and the atmosphere is thick with the scent of burning myrrh, frankincense, and the complex, honeyed aroma of kaifi. Kaifi was a legendary blend, a meticulous mixture of resins, wine, honey, and aromatic herbs that priests would offer to the gods as the sun began to set. The rising smoke was more than a ritual. It symbolized the soul ascending, a silent, fragrant message sent from the warm earth to the high heaven. In this world, to smell sweet was to be pure, to be closer to the eternal and the divine. Perfume was woven into every layer of Egyptian spiritual and royal life. The dead were carefully embalmed with scented oils, and their final resting places were filled with elegant alabaster jars of perfume to ensure they remained fragrant and pure in the afterlife. To the Egyptian mind, the importance of scent did not end with death. It was a companion for the soul's journey through the underworld. Even ordinary people believed that these pleasing aromas possessed the power to ward off evil spirits, creating a sanctuary of scent within their homes. Scent was an armor, a blessing, and a memory all at once. The pharaohs, as living representatives of the divine, would anoint themselves with sacred oils before every ritual and every battle, for scent was inextricably linked to power and rank. The higher one's status, the more complex and costly, their perfume became precious blends, infused with cinnamon, cardamom, and the delicate lotus, ingredients imported from mysterious, far-off land. Perhaps the most iconic master of this art was Cleopatra, who understood that scent could control perception and announce her power before her presence was even felt. Legend tells us she would soak the sails of her royal barge in rose water, so that the wind itself would carry her fragrance down the river, announcing her arrival long before her ship appeared on the horizon. One of the most haunting revelations of this ancient devotion occurred in our modern age. When Tutankhamun's tomb was finally opened in 1922, archaeologists reported a miracle of the senses. A faint, ghostly trace of perfume still lingered in the air, a scent that had survived in the darkness for over 3,000 years. It was an undeniable proof that in Egypt, scent was never just about beauty. It was about belief, memory, and a thread that connected the human spirit to the eternal. As you listen, picture the blue lotus flowers floating on the calm obsidian waters of the Nile under a vast starlit sky. The river is silent, the air is cool, and the world is at peace. Feel yourself drifting with the slow, invisible current of the water. Your body light and relaxed as the ancient smoke clears to reveal a new horizon. From the majestic temples of Egypt, the scent now travels east, carried on a warm breeze to the hidden rose gardens of Persia and the sacred fires of Mesopotamia. As the sun sets over the Nile, the torch of fragrance passes further east, into the lands of ziggurats and the lush valleys where the first civilizations carved their name into history. In Mesopotamia, among the ancient temples of Sumer, perfume continued its role as a bridge between the mortal and the divine. We find evidence of this on clay tablets dating back over 4,000 years, which describe the careful preparation of scented oils using cedar, myrrh, and cypress. These were not merely cosmetics. They were sacred substances rubbed onto the statues of gods, applied to priests, and sealed into burial urns with the promise of eternal fragrance. Further east, in the lush lands of the Indus Valley in ancient India, the connection between scent and the spirit deepened into a profound sacred tradition. Ancient texts spoke of fragrance as one of the essential elements of sacred worship, and temples were filled with the grounding, earthy aroma of sandalwood paste. Here, perfume was more than a ritual. It was a gesture of grace, woven into the fabric of daily life, marriage, and love. India became a pioneer in the art of attar, making the patient distillation of flowers into oil, often using a base of sandalwood. Imagine the artisans of old, following methods that remain unchanged to this day, letting the scent of jasmine, rose, or vetiver slowly infuse into the oil, drop by precious drop, over a low flame, and with endless patience. This was a science of the soul, a way to capture the fleeting beauty of a bloom and hold it forever. In Persia, this love of fragrance was mirrored in the creation of magnificent gardens. Kings like Cyrus and Darius surrounded their palaces with roses and violets, not just for the visual splendor, but for the way the breeze would carry their scent through the open, airy hall. The Persian word for rose, gal, found its way into every corner of their culture, from poetry to medicine. Even in China, perfume found a place of subtle power associated with balance, inner harmony, and the quiet, scholarly reflection. There, fragrance was not loud or demanding. It was associative and meditative. Robes were lightly scented, scrolls were perfumed, and inkstones carried the faint aroma of agarwood or cassia, bark, a soft breath of calm that accompanied the stroke of a brush. Across all these ancient lands, perfume was evolving from a sacrifice for the gods into a living art, a science and a quiet signature of civilization itself. You are now deep within the sensory drift. The air around you is rich with the history of 1,000 blossoms, each note a memory of a world long past. Feel the tension leaving your body as you breathe in the coolness of these ancient gardens. Your mind is quiet, your heart is steady, and the world is soft. As these eastern scents linger, we prepare to follow them as they wind their way toward the philosophers of Greece and the extravagant, flower-strewn halls of Rome. The journey through the air continues, moving slowly toward the west, where scent will soon become a symbol of wealth, sophistication, and the very essence of human identity. In the quiet, shadowed courtyards of medieval Baghdad, beneath the silver, cool glow of the crescent moon, alchemists perfected the art of capturing the very soul of a flower in a single precious drop of oil. While the Western world had largely turned away from the luxuries of scent, viewing them as worldly indulgences or even suspicious vanities, the Islamic world embraced fragrance as a refined science, a medical necessity, and a sacred tradition. The Prophet Muhammad himself had spoken fondly of fragrance, viewing it as a beloved element of this world, which encouraged its use before prayer and in the rhythm of daily life. The air in cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo was thick with the scent of innovation and the steam of the laboratory. Perfumers, known as Atarians, worked in narrow stone-lined stalls filled with delicate glass vials and copper vessels, experimenting with botanical alchemy to extract essential oils from flowers, precious woods, and ancient resin. They believed that to capture a scent was to capture a fleeting moment of divine creation, preserving the essence of a summer bloom long after the petals had returned to the earth. Among these brilliant minds stood a figure of monumental importance, Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, a Persian polymath of immense intellect. He revolutionized the world of perfume by developing the refined process of steam distillation. Before his discovery, oils were often extracted through heavy pressing or long infusions, which could leave the scent clouded, oily, or weakened by the weight of the base. But through the use of the cooled coiled pipe of the alembic, Avicenna allowed the essence of roses to be carried by rising steam and then condensed back into a pure, crystalline liquid form. This allowed the scent of roses to last forever, consistent, pure, and hauntingly beautiful. Imagine the laboratory of such a scholar, the low, rhythmic hum of the fire, the steady, hypnotic drip of the distillate into a glass flask, and the overwhelming, heavenly aroma of thousands of damask rose petals yielding their secrets to the water and the heat. This was a science of patience, a way to isolate the invisible breath of nature. As the centuries turned, glass flasks filled with these precious, distilled oils began to move along the great, dusty trade routes carried by merchants from the bustling markets of India to the sun-drenched plains of Spain. These travelers brought with them more than just luxury goods. They brought a new cultural language of scent that left a fragrant trace in every city they passed. They carried frankincense from the rugged, misty mountains of Oman, sandalwood from Southeast Asia, musk from the high, silent plateaus of Tibet, and ambergris gathered from the distant, salty depths of the sea. Each bottle was a vessel of memory, a concentrated fragment of a distant land that spoke of exotic gardens and sacred fires. When these refined scents re-entered medieval Europe through the movements of crusaders, scholars, and traders, they were met with a strange mixture of awe and profound anxiety. During times of plague and mysterious illness, people believed that foul odors, the infamous miasma, were the literal carriers of death drifting through the streets. In this era of fear, scent became a form of armor, a shield against the invisible. Doctors wore long, bird-like masks, stuffed with dried lavender, cinnamon, and cloves to purify the very air they breathed. Nobles carried pomanders, small, ornate metal balls filled with resins and spices, which they would sniff as they walked through crowded markets to ward off the stench of disease. Paradoxically, while they feared the air, they also began to shun water, believing that bathing opened the body's pores to the sickness in the air. In the absence of washing, heavy musks and floral oils became a necessity to mask the realities of body odor and poor hygiene. Yet, beneath this shield of fear, the knowledge of distillation was quietly taking root in the monasteries and laboratories of the West. Alchemists began experimenting with native rosemary and lavender, recording recipes that would eventually lead to the first alcohol-based perfume. The Hungary water of the 14th century, a blend of rosemary and wine spirits, marked a transition toward lighter, more refreshing spirits. The world was beginning to breathe deeply once more, preparing for a revolution of fashion and sophisticated elegance. In the 16th century, the heart of the perfume world shifted decisively to a small town tucked into the rolling, sun-drenched hills of Provence. The city of Grasse is a place where the sun seems to linger longer on the hillsides, and the soil is perfectly tuned to the needs of the most delicate and temperamental blooms. Originally, however, Grasse was known for a much humbler and more pungent trade, the tanning of leather, a process that filled the streets with the sharp, unpleasant smell of treated hides. The transition began with the arrival of Catherine de' Medici, the Queen of France, who brought with her from Italy a sophisticated love for fragrance and personal perfumers. She employed her own artisans to create scented gloves, masking the animal scent of the leather with the essence of flowers. This trend caught on with such intensity among the nobility that the city of Grasse transitioned almost entirely from the smell of leather to the fragrance of lavender, jasmine, and orange trees. The sun-drenched fields surrounding the city became the cradle of modern perfumery, where rose petals were harvested at the first light of dawn, and jasmine was hand-picked in the dead of night, when its scent was at its absolute peak. Imagine those fields in the early morning, amidst the cool dew on the leaves, the rhythmic movement of the harvesters, and the overwhelming sweetness of millions of blossoms being gathered by hand. As the French court at Versailles grew more extravagant, so too did its appetite for scent. Under Louis IV, known as the Perfumed King, the palace became a temple of aroma. Rooms were perfumed with orange water, furniture was rubbed with scented wax, and courtiers powdered their wigs with violet and amber to maintain an air of perpetual freshness. Perfumery had become a national art, an intricate composition where artisans trained for years to balance top notes, heart notes, and bass notes to absolute perfection. It was no longer a mask against disease or a whisper to the divine. It was now luxury, identity, and a silent, sophisticated language spoken through the skin. As we reach the modern era, fragrance remains one of the few things in our lives that cannot be digitized, downloaded, or replicated through a screen. You must wear it, feel it, and let it linger on your skin as it reacts to the heat of your body. It is a diary of our lives, the smell of forest rain on a hot pavement, antique leather in a quiet library, or the scent of a lost summer evening by the sea. Despite all our scientific breakthroughs in synthetic molecules, the reason we reach for perfume remains the same as it was in the temples of Egypt. Memory. A single breath of lavender, tobacco, or orange peel can transport you across the world in an instant. Back to a kitchen from your childhood or a train station in a city you once loved. Perfume is history you wear, emotion in vapor, and a presence that remains even in absence. The scent of jasmine is strongest at night. Imagine it now, drifting through your open window on a cool, dark breeze. The petals open only when the sun has fully disappeared, releasing their heavy, sweet fragrance into the stillness as the rest of the world goes to sleep. Feel the softness of this aroma as it wraps around you, grounding you in the present moment while connecting you to the thousands of years of history we have just traversed. Your body is heavy, your limbs are relaxed, and your thoughts are slow, rhythmic, and peaceful. The scent of the night is all you need to know, as the aroma lingers and the air grows still. The world begins to change once more. The fragrance starts to fade into a new kind of atmosphere, a vibration of sound rather than a lingering scent. The air begins to vibrate with the first faint notes of an Italian song, calling us away from the gardens of Provence and toward the grand theaters and the soaring, divine voices of the opera. Night is falling deeper now. The stars are bright, and the song of history is just beginning to rise. Feel yourself letting go, drifting from the world of scent into the world of melody, as the music carries you toward a deeper, more profound rest. As the fragrance of the night jasmine slowly lingers and the air grows still, the world begins to change once more. The heavy, sweet aroma of the gardens starts to fade into a new kind of atmosphere, a vibration of sound rather than a scent. We are leaving the world of the senses and entering the silent, sacred world of the soul. In the late 16th century, as the year 1500 drew to a close, Italy was brimming with the quiet, transformative energy of a new era. The Renaissance had rekindled a deep passion for the ancient world, not just its cold marble statues and dusty, forgotten philosophies, but its living myths, its grand, tragic theater, and its mysterious music. Architects were resurrecting the perfect balance of Roman geometry, and painters were capturing divine moments in human form. But the musicians were searching for something much deeper, something that lay hidden in the echoes of the past. They asked a peculiar, haunting question that resonated through the stone halls of Florence. What did ancient Greek drama truly sound like? This question was not merely academic or intellectual. It was a spiritual quest. These thinkers of the late Renaissance believed with all their hearts that the plays of Sophocles and Euripides were not merely spoken in a dry, flat tone, but were sung from beginning to end. They believed that in ancient times, music and speech had flowed together as one single, inseparable and divine stream of human expression. They imagined a world where every word carried a melody, and every melody told a story. They hoped that in rediscovering this fusion, a new art form could be born, one that could touch the modern soul with the same intensity as the ancients. In the city of Florence, a small and dedicated circle of poets, composers, and scholars began to gather around Count Giovanni de Bardi. They called themselves the Camerata, a name that suggested a chamber or a room where intimate ideas could breathe. Their mission was bold, beautiful, and revolutionary. They wanted to recreate the emotional power of Greek tragedy, not with a massive spectacle or loud instruments, but with pure sound and music that could move the soul directly, without the tangled, distracting complexities of the era's popular choral styles. One of their most passionate and vocal members was Vincenzo Galilei, the father of the famous astronomer Galileo. He argued with great conviction that harmony should never dominate expression, and that music should instead mirror the natural, rhythmic rise and fall of human thought and feeling. Imagine these men sitting in a candlelit salon, the orange shadows dancing slowly on the high stone walls as they debated the very nature of human emotion. They believed that a simple melody, rather than mathematical complexity, held the absolute key to the human heart. Out of this profound belief, a new musical form emerged. Monody, a single, elegant melodic line sung by one voice, supported only by a simple instrumental accompaniment. It was a voice unencumbered, telling a story not with words alone, but with the raw, honest vibration of feeling. The first experiments in this new melodic style were modest, quiet, and intensely private affairs performed only in the exclusive gatherings of the Florentine elite. They were musical dramas based on ancient familiar myth stories of gods, nymphs, and heroes, designed not to dazzle a massive crowd, but to stir the individual spirit of the listener. In these private velvet-draped salons, the very first breath of what we now call opera was taken, though at the time the form remained unnamed and mysterious. These scholars saw themselves as archaeologists of sound, patiently attempting to revive a lost tradition from 1,000 years prior. But in their search for an ancient truth, they unknowingly gave birth to something entirely modern and timeless. They began the delicate process of blending recitation with melody, creating compositions that moved seamlessly between speech and song. This allowed the characters on their small stages to reveal their deepest, most private emotions through rising and falling tones that mimicked the natural patterns of the human voice in moments of sudden joy or profound heavy grief. The result of this experiment was recitative, the very heartbeat and foundation of early opera. In the year 1597, the composer Jacopo Peri premiered a work titled Daphne, based on the Greek myth of the nymph and the god Apollo. The reveal of Daphne was a quiet, internal revolution in the world art. It was an intimate experiment for the elite, a performance stage for a tiny, focused audience where, for the first time in centuries, music carried the weight of the entire drama. Music was no longer merely an ornament, a background, or a distraction. It was the primary storyteller. Peri followed this success with Eurydice in the year 1600, a work composed specifically for the grand wedding of Maria de' Medici to King Henry IV of France. It is the first complete opera that survives to this day, a precious relic featuring sung dialogue, expressive arias, and choruses. It was the sound of a tradition being born in real time, a fusion of art, poetry, and performance that stepped boldly into the light of history. Another key figure, Giulio Caccini, published a collection titled Le Nuove Musique, featuring solo songs that pushed monody even closer to the soaring, lyrical beauty of the operatic aria, a moment for the voice to linger, to soar, and to express the truly inexpressible. As you listen to the story of these first ancient melodies, allow your own body to sync with the music of the past. The melody of early opera rises and falls like the gentle, steady, and certain rhythm of your own heart. There is no tension here, no hurry, only the slow ebb and flow of sound through a quiet room. Imagine the flickering, low candlelight in a dark Florentine palace, the heavy velvet curtains hanging still and silent, and the single, pure voice of a singer reaching out through the darkness. The music does not demand your attention. It does not shout or pull. It simply invites you to drift within its embrace. These early operas were never meant to be grand or loud. They were chamber dramas, intimate experiences designed to let the music weep, plead, celebrate, and grieve alongside the listener. Feel the weight of your limbs as the singer's voice soars toward the high rafters, then softly, slowly descends back to earth. The air around you is cool, calm, and perfectly still. Your thoughts are becoming like the recitative itself, slow, rhythmic, and peaceful, flowing without the pressure or the noise of the day. You are safe in this sanctuary of sound, protected by the beauty of an art form that was created specifically to touch the human soul in its most quiet moments, while Jacopo Peri and Giulio Caccini laid the necessary foundations. It was Claudio Monteverdi who truly turned this new form into a profound art. Born in 1567, he was a bridge between the Renaissance and the Baroque, A man who understood that music should not just hint at emotion, but embody it. In 1607, he premiered L'Orfeo, a retelling of the myth of Orpheus, the musician who journeys into the very depths of the underworld to find his lost beloved. Monteverdi made the music speak with the soul. When Orpheus rejoices, the music dances with light. And when he mourns, the harmonies twist and weep with a tangible sorrow. The Camerata may have longed to revive the ancient world, but in their search, they gave us a modern way to express the depths of our own humanity. As you breathe deeply and slowly, let the harmony of the Renaissance settle into your bone. Your mind is quiet, your heart is at peace, and the world of the living is very, very distant. The intimate, candlelit salons of Florence are beginning to fade now, the light dimming as the music seeks a larger, more public stage. From the private, quiet rooms of the nobility, the music begins to move, traveling across the Italian landscape toward the salt mist, the dark lagoons, and the moonlight of the public theaters of Venice. The curtain is rising on a new era of spectacle, and you are drifting closer and closer to a deep, transformative, and final sleep. As the candlelit salons of Florence begin to fade into a soft, hazy memory of a distant past, the music seeks a larger, more vibrant stage upon which to breathe. We travel now across the quiet, sleeping Italian landscape, following the moonlit paths toward the salt mist and the dark, shimmering lagoons of Venice. In the year 1637, a radical and permanent transformation occurred that would change the very course of musical history forever. Venice, a city built not just on stone, but on the rhythm of the tides and the secrets of the sea, opened the first public opera house, the Teatro San Cassiano d'Ottoli. This singular moment made music a grand spectacle for everyone, not just the dukes and duchesses hidden behind high, exclusive palace walls. It was a revolutionary shift in the human spirit. Opera, which had been born in the scholarly silence of private rooms, was now a living, breathing entertainment for the masses. Venice was the perfect mystical cradle for this explosion of art, a city built on trade, mystery, and the eternal theater of the street. Imagine the atmosphere of a cool Venetian evening during the height of the carnival season, a time when the thin lines between reality and performance blurred into one indistinguishable dream. The city thrived on drama, both in its winding canals and on its stages, with elaborate masks hiding the true identities and social statuses of every soul who packed into the theater. By the mid-1600s, Venice boasted over a dozen opera houses, each competing for attention with increasingly lavish scenery, ghostly ships, golden palaces, and even infernos rising from hidden trapdoors to dazzle the wide-eyed audience. Ordinary citizens could now buy a simple ticket and step into a world of pure enchantment, where the music grew more expressive and the plots leaned toward the heavy, resonant themes of romance, betrayal, and sacrifice. Opera was no longer just a sound to be heard. It was a visual and emotional feast that commanded the absolute silence and devotion of the entire world. Within these grand and shadowed Venetian theaters, a new kind of performer rose to the very height of global fame, becoming the undisputed superstars of the 17th and 18th centuries, the castrati. These were male singers who possessed voices that sounded truly otherworldly, surreal, and divine voices that seemed to exist in the ethereal space between the earth and the star. They possessed the high, crystalline, vocal range of a soprano, but with the immense lung power and muscular control of an adult male body. Their voices were described by those who heard them as brilliant, agile, and utterly haunting. capable of hurling thunder down from the high stage, or floating as delicately as mist over the evening orchestra. While the origins of their path were marked by a history that was both medically and morally troubling, the castrati themselves were adored far beyond their vocal talents alone. They were the first true celebrities of the modern era, commanding enormous, kingly fees and inspiring a level of frenzied admiration that reached near mythic proportions in every cultural capital of Europe. Some lived lavish, eccentric lives, collecting rare art and weaving legends as they traveled from one royal court to another. Composers began to shape their entire operas, and indeed their entire creative lives, around these magnificent and strange voices, creating the da capo, a musical form that allowed the singer to deliver a simple, beautiful melody and then depart into elaborate, breathtaking improvisation when the section returned. This was the singular moment the audience waited for with bated breath. The performer standing alone in a pool of light, pushing the human voice to its furthest, most impossible edge of beauty. The true reveal of their power was found in their absolute, unwavering mastery of the breath. These singers could hold a single, pure note for what seemed like an eternity, commanding a total and absolute silence from even the most rowdy of crowds. In that silence, the modern world stopped moving. A singer could hold the stage for 10 minutes or more, creating complex trills and leaps on a single sustained breath that left the audience gasping in collective wonder. The most famous of these, Farinelli, was a singer whose fame reached near mythic proportions, said to have used his voice to cure the deep depression of a king, and inspired arias of such impossible beauty that they still haunt the corridors of musical history today. As you rest now in the absolute stillness of your own room, allow the soaring phantom notes of a lost aria to carry you further into the warm darkness. There is no longer any need to understand the complex words or the tangled plots of betrayal, honor, and ancient myths. There is only the pure vibration of the voice, a raw human emotion that expresses what language alone cannot contain. The true power of opera lies in its ability to elevate the human experience into something divine, creating a sanctuary where music and drama become inseparable forces, driving us toward peace. Feel the heavy weight of your body as the imaginary music of Venice washes over you like a slow tide, its rhythms as steady and dependable as the ancient waters of the lagoon. From the ceremonial, sacred halls of Rome to the technical, fiery brilliance of Naples, Italian opera conquered the hearts of all Europe, becoming the first truly international language of beauty and sophisticated power. It was a world where gods could fall in love and ordinary peasants could outwit princes, all through the medium of a song that refused to be forgotten. But as the 18th century drew to its inevitable close, the grand, gilded age of the voice began to shift once more, moving away from the mythic and the divine, and back toward the deeply human and the realistic. As the final heavy velvet curtain falls on the grand theaters of the Baroque, we take a long, slow breath and look back at a world that eventually crumbled into a beautiful mystery. The voices that once filled these magnificent libraries and archives are now but echoes, fragments of a time that seems both eternal and yet unreachable. The grand arcs of history are long, and as we prepare to drift into the deepest, most quiet part of the night, we find a profound peace in the silence that follows the final song. The story of the voice ends here, in the cool air of the Venetian night, but the story of the earth is just beginning to whisper its secrets. Sleep now as the final notes vanish into the dark, and let the silence of the ages become your own. Around the year 1200 BCE, the magnificent and deeply interconnected world of the Late Bronze Age began to crack. not with a single blow, but with a slow, systemic fraying of the spirit. Before this sudden, fractured silence, the Eastern Mediterranean thrived as a sprawl, golden web of shared resources, where powerful empires were not isolated strangers, but were brothers in trade, language, and diplomacy. Imagine the vast blue waters of the Aegean and the Levant, dotted with white sails carrying precious copper from Cyprus and rare tin from the far off misty mountains of Afghanistan. These were the two essential metals required to forge the bronze that defined the very soul of the age, the substance of their tool, their weapons, and their status. Great kings in their high-walled palaces corresponded in the international, rhythmic language of Akkadian, exchanging elaborate letters of friendship and luxury gifts like gold, ivory, lapis lazuli, and fine perfumes. It was a globalized age of monumental temples, grand pharaohs, and sophisticated diplomacy that seemed as eternal as the rising sun. Yet, such immense complexity brought with it a hidden, brittle vulnerability. When the rains began to fail over decades and the trade routes faltered, the entire magnificent system began to groan and crack under its own weight. Within the span of just a few decades, almost every major palace in this ancient, structured world was destroyed, burned, or simply abandoned to the wind. Across the rugged hills of mainland Greece, the Mycenaeans, the warrior kings, who inspired the timeless legends of Achilles and Agamemnon, saw their stone fortresses, once thought impregnable, burned to the ground. To the north, the Hittite Empire, a massive superpower that once rivaled the might of Egypt and mastered the early secrets of iron, simply ceased to exist as a political entity. Their great capital, Hattusa, was abandoned by its people and buried beneath layers of ash, silence, and stone, leaving no grand inscription to explain the cause of its sudden, total fall. Even the mighty Egyptian New Kingdom, under the last of the great pharaohs, was forced onto the defensive, desperately fighting off the mysterious sea peoples, and eventually withdrawing into itself as its central authority eroded away. The grand cities that had seemed like the pillars of the earth vanished, their populations declining, as the hungry and the desperate moved away into the quiet countryside just to survive. The most haunting and profound reveal of this collapse was that writing itself almost entirely disappeared, leaving centuries of human history in a state of total, heavy silence. The specialized scribes, who had for centuries meticulously tracked every grain shipment, every royal decree, and every prayer to the gods, vanished along with the palaces that housed. In Greece, the complex script known as Linear B was completely lost to human memory, and for hundreds of years, not a single word was written down on that soil. The ancient cuneiform and the early alphabets of the coast fell into disuse, existing only in forgotten ruins. This was a loss of collective memory on a civilizational scale. For long generations, the only record of this lost golden world survived in oral traditions, whispered over smoky hearths in small villages and sung by wandering poets, until the history eventually slipped into the dreamlike realm of myth and legend. Today, the ruins of these once great and noisy empires are finally eternally quiet, covered by the deep, protective dust of time and the profound, enduring peace of the earth. The fierce battles, the royal intrigues, and the desperate clay letters for help have all faded into the absolute stillness of the landscape. The Bronze Age ended not with a final victory, but with a great mystery, a reset that cleared the space for something new, something iron and something different to eventually bloom. As you lie here in the safety and the comfort of the present moment, imagine the soft settling dust over the fallen stones of Hattusa, and the quiet holes of Mycenae. There is no more struggle, no more noise, and no more weight, only the resilience of the earth that outlasts every empire and every story. We often wonder what traces our own busy world will leave behind in the layers of the soil, and if we too are but a single fleeting chapter in a much longer book of cycles, whispers, and resets. But that is a thought for the waking world, a world that is now very far away. For now, the long journey of the traveler, the invisible scent of the jasmine, and the soaring song of the opera have all reached their soft conclusion. Sleep now, as the story ends, and the silence of the ages becomes your own. The night is deep, the air is perfectly still, and you are finally, completely at rest. The world is at peace, and so are you. Sleep, sleep, sleep.